2018, this instability became a defining trait in Jonathan's behavior. He would sometimes accept the facts presented to him and acknowledge some level of guilt, only to later retract those admissions and again place blame on Gregory or even the entire Fouillot family. Investigators saw this as a tactic meant to stall the process, reduce pressure, and muddy the waters. For the family, though, it felt like a deep betrayal, an attack on their character and dignity. People who had stood beside him at memorials now watched as he openly cast suspicion on them. Public perception of Jonathan shifted completely. From that point forward, his strategy of denial began to backfire, intensifying both legal and social pressure. By the end of 2018, the investigation into Jonathan Duval took a decisive turn. The mounting weight of evidence became overwhelming, and for the first time, he admitted to playing a direct role in Alexia's death. On November 23rd, he stated that during the night of October 28, 2017, an argument between him and Alexia escalated into a physical struggle. According to his account, the conflict started over a refusal to be intimate, then turned into shouting and pushing. He claimed he lost control and ended up strangling her with his hands. This marked his first formal admission of guilt. However, just days later, he once again changed his story. During court proceedings in December, Jonathan shifted the blame back onto his brother-in-law, Gregory Gay, insisting that it was Gregory who had lost control and caused Alexia's death. This version contradicted his own previous confession. To Alexia's family, these repeated reversals felt like deliberate distortions of the truth. On December 7th, 2018, a face-to-face meeting was arranged between Jonathan and the Fouillot family. Under pressure and during a direct conversation with Alexia's mother, Jonathan broke down. When shown a photograph of Alexia, he stopped denying the facts and admitted that he alone was responsible. A critical moment in the investigation came on June 17, 2019, during a crime scene reenactment. Conducted early in the morning to mirror the conditions of the original event, Jonathan walked investigators through his actions step by step. He admitted to punching his wife between 5 and 10 times in the face before strangling her with his hands. Later, realizing he needed to hide the body, he transported it to the woods and attempted to burn it in an effort to hinder identification and eliminate evidence. These revelations drastically shifted the view of what had occurred. While he had previously portrayed the incident as a tragic accident, the new details revealed a deliberate sequence of violent actions: assault, suffocation, the intentional disposal of the body, and the attempt to destroy evidence. In the summer of 2019, new psychological evaluations were added to the case file. Specialists diagnosed Jonathan with a personality disorder characterized by obsessive traits, a need for control, and ritualistic behavior. Some experts also noted issues of psychological impotence, which had contributed to escalating marital tension. Alexia had expressed a strong desire to start a family, but difficulties conceiving became a recurring source of conflict. In their messages, she accused Jonathan of failing to address the issue. He, in turn, blamed her for being overly demanding. By the end of 2019, Jonathan's defense had completely unraveled. His repeated confessions, the reenactment, and expert analysis all supported the conclusion that this was not an accident. It was a series of intentional actions aimed at concealing the truth. Jonathan Duval's trial began in November 2020. The court proceedings took place under public health restrictions. Transparent dividers were installed, seating was limited, and attendees were spaced apart. The jury consisted of 6 people, 5 women and 1 man. The trial was fast-paced, with consecutive days filled with witness testimony and expert analysis. On the first day of the trial, the court laid out the full scope of the charges, the intentional taking of a spouse's life. The presiding judge read through the key findings of the investigation and listed the various versions Jonathan Duval had given over time, from outright denials to eventual confessions. The defendant acknowledged responsibility for Alexia's death, but continued to describe the incident as a fight that got out of control. Next, expert testimony was presented. The forensic pathologist detailed the nature of Alexia's injuries and confirmed that there were no signs of sexual aggression after her passing. Psychiatrists concluded that while Jonathan did not suffer from any condition that would make him legally unfit, his personality traits and built-up emotional strain posed a clear criminological risk. On the second day, Alexia's parents took the stand. They demanded full clarity about the motives and sequence of events leading to their daughter's death. At the following hearing, Jonathan testified. He became physically unwell at the beginning of questioning, but continued after a brief pause. He admitted that he understood the deadly consequences of his actions when he tightened his hands around her neck. The defense argued that it was an outburst during a moment of marital conflict, without premeditation. Witnesses, including friends and colleagues, spoke about the contrasting personalities in the marriage. Alexia, energetic and assertive, and Jonathan, withdrawn and reluctant to engage in difficult conversations. The ongoing stress around their attempts to conceive a child also came up. These dynamics helped paint a picture of their home life, but the court repeatedly emphasized that none of it excused the severity of what had been done, or the attempt to hide it afterward. By the end of the trial, emotions inside the courtroom were at a breaking point. During the final hearing, Alexia's mother, Isabelle Fouillot, once again asked Jonathan to recount everything in clear, specific detail, step by step. At that moment, Jonathan dropped to his knees and asked for forgiveness, though he offered no new information. The prosecution called for a harsh sentence, citing the totality of evidence pointing to intent. The Fouillot family did not demand the maximum penalty. They asked, instead, for a full and unambiguous admission of guilt. On November 21, 2020, the verdict was delivered. The jury found Jonathan Duval guilty of the intentional killing of his wife. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison with a mandatory minimum of 12.5 years before eligibility for early release. The defense chose not to appeal, and Jonathan was immediately transferred to begin serving his sentence. That marked the conclusion of the public phase of the case. The court had determined legal responsibility, and the community had its answer to the question of who took Alexia's life. While civil matters remained, the criminal proceedings had ended, with a confession supported by evidence and a sentence reflecting the gravity of the crime. After the verdict, civil claims followed. Alexia's parents sought financial compensation for emotional suffering and material loss. The initial request was nearly €379,000. Jonathan's defense considered the amount excessive and countered with an offer of approximately €165,000. In June 2022, the Court of Appeals upheld his conviction and finalized the compensation at €160,000. At the same time, the family made the decision to move on from places tied to the past. The couple's former home was sold, as was Jean-Pierre's family cafe. The funds were redirected toward new ventures and to support their older daughter and grandchildren, a step toward closing a traumatic chapter and focusing on the future. The story of Alexia Duval's murder spread far beyond the small town of Gray. It became part of a national conversation in France about domestic violence. Every new development in the investigation and trial was covered in the media, sparking responses from human rights organizations and calls for public action. Memorial marches and vigils held in her name became powerful symbols of society's commitment to protecting women from violence in the home. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.